opinion?
I'm personally a pansexual, so I was just wondering what your views on same-sex couples were.
I don't have a negative view of same-sex couples, but I do have a negative view of a tyranny of the minority. So I think that in the name of protecting against a tyranny of the majority, and there are times in this country's history where we have had a tyranny of the majority, we have now, in the name of protecting against tyranny of the majority, created a new tyranny of the minority. And I think that that's wrong. I don't think that somebody who's religious should be forced to officiate a wedding that they disagree with. I don't think somebody who is a woman who's worked really hard for her achievements should be forced to compete against a biological man in a swim competition. I don't think that somebody who's a woman that respects her bodily autonomy and dignity should be forced to change clothes in a locker room with a man. That's not freedom, that's oppression. And so I believe that we live in a country where free adults should be free to dress how they want, behave how they want, and that's fine. But you don't become oppressive by foisting that on others. And that especially includes kids, because kids aren't the same as adults.
Hello, family. Welcome back to another episode of Journey to Harmony. I'm your host, Richard Harmon. Today, I want to talk to you about an interview that was done between Vivek Ramaswamy and Tucker Carlson. The two had a chance to sit down and just to discuss the rise and overall thoughts Vivek has in terms of the LGBTQ community, his thoughts on the nation as a whole, and what is it exactly he wants to see from the country. For the longest time, I've always believed that the candidate that America needed at this time was a mixture of Donald Trump and Barack Obama. He'd have the policies and the forcefulness of Donald Trump. He'd have the uniqueness and the ability to speak very persuasively as Barack Obama did. Vivek Ramaswamy looks to be a mixture of these two. And I don't know if he's able to make up the ground that he's needed, but he's capturing the mind of many in ways that I didn't believe a politician could. I'm going to go ahead and play a video here on this particular interview. We'll watch it. We'll come back and see how it go from there.
And I think that religion is actually, it's the same religion. Whether it relates to the climate dogma, whether it relates to LGBTQIA plus-ism, whether it relates to racial wokeism, it's a broader vision that defines itself in opposition to the American vision, to the American way of life that says we are individuals who are members of these units we call families which are embedded in the substructure of this thing we call a nation, and a nation which exists under the broader blessing of God. Individual, family, nation, God. That is one worldview. And the thing we're describing here is an alternative worldview grounded in race, in gender, in sexuality, in climate. And one of the things that I feel for some of the people who subscribe to this religion, I somewhat felt for this woman, right? She wasn't, there are others like her. There's another one actually at the Iowa State Fair who had similar beliefs that did not comport him or her or they self, whatever this individual was, in the same civil manner that this woman did. He had a cowbell and it was ringing and was antithetical to having conversation. This woman, at least having a conversation, I kind of felt for her because what I saw in her eyes was she's not an evil person who's trying to be a crusader for some faith to put the other side out of business. Those people exist. She was just lost, actually. Right? I don't know if it was harder to see on the camera, but I was face to face with her. And when I see that, it's why I also thanked her. I said, thank you for being civil in your exchange. And I'll give you the same courtesy in return. I mean, she was early 20s, best my guess. She's lost. There's a void there.
Yeah.
Right? So I asked her the question back. There's a blank stare you get in a response. It's almost the same blank stare as if I asked most young people on a given day, what does it mean to be American? It's that same blank stare. That's the void. It's like a deer in the headlights. And I think that this is our moment, our duty, our job as leaders. It's the job of the next U.S. president. It might be the most important one of all.
Definitely. So with this right now, we have a society, right, that is a bit fractured. And what I'm seeing for the most part is that there's 10% on the left, there's 10% on the right. Those particular individuals, regardless, they've made up their mind. Whether their side is right or wrong, they've decided this is the way that they're going. but there's 80% of the country that is looking for leadership and looking for direction. There are people who are legitimately confused, who have been told that this is the way of life, who have been indoctrinated, in schools and different things like that, who are looking for someone who that the message makes sense, but you have to deliver it in a way that is acceptable. There are different types of learning in our ecosystem, right? There's the auditory learner, there's a visual learner. Being able to speak to people in their way of understanding is the job of a leader. It's not to just be combative and to be able to get someone with zingers or something like that. We as a time right now, if we do not come together as a nation, we will fall as individuals. And Vivek Ramaswamy, many of his statements and his topics are focused on the idea of what it is to be an American. I remember in 2001 how well the country came together, regardless of your beliefs on what happened or anything like that. The country was united for the most part on this idea that we are a society when we are one. But over the last 20 years, we've become so fractured. Just everyone is kind of focused on themselves. The iPhone, all these other things have created a bifurcated market overall. We'll go ahead and continue the interview.
To fill that void with an answer to the question of what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be you? What does it mean to be an individual rather than riding a tectonic plate of group identity? What does it mean to be a member of a family, a nuclear family with a mother and a father that by definition brought you into this world? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a citizen of this nation? Not some nebulous, vague global citizen fighting climate change. No, but a citizen of this nation on this land with these ideals. What does it mean to believe in God, to be a nation under God? I think that's our moment. And I believe that if we fill that void with an actual affirmative vision, we will dilute these other poisons to irrelevance. They are symptoms. They're symptoms of a deeper cancer. That cancer itself is a void, a black hole. Fill that void with an actual affirmative vision of who we really are. That's got to be how we win. And the thing that frustrates me most actually about the Republican Party, Tucker, isn't even, the neoconism in our foreign policy. And it frustrates me deeply, but this feels solvable through an alternative set of policies, right? I can go do deals on a global stage and let's hope I'll be successful if I'm in that seat. I think I will. But this is actually the deeper challenge. You can only stand up with the spine abroad or in an economy or whatever if you at least first know who you really are. And I think that is the far more difficult question. It's not going to happen through policy, but somebody. It doesn't have to be a U.S. president. It could be someone who has a media outlet. It could be a religious figure, but it could be a parent. Maybe it's not one person. Maybe, which is what I think the real answer is going to be. Maybe it's going to have to be leaders in the different spheres of our lives, each stepping up and speaking with conviction to the question of answering who we really are. And I think the U.S. president has a role to play there in answering who we are as Americans. And the thing that really frustrates me back about the Republican Party is, I wrote Woke Inc. a couple of years ago. You were kind enough to help me launch that book with you, and we had a great conversation, and a lot of people read it. And then the Republican Party starts reciting memorized chapter and verses from, not just my book, but maybe others like it, but mine included, but without actually knowing what they're even talking about. They understand the word, they're uttering the words, but they don't really understand the phenomenon they're addressing, which stops you from actually getting to the true solution, which is actually understanding that there's a deeper void and vacuum that we have to fill with an affirmative alternative vision of our own. That takes courage. That takes vision. That takes some level of imagination of what is actually possible. You don't have to imagine it too much. It's been true for most of our history, so you can maybe just draw from that. That's how I do it. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Let's maybe just borrow from the people who set this thing into motion. They had a pretty good idea of what they were doing. But that's what this moment calls for. And either we rise to that occasion and we take that 1776 spring spirit and we channel it into a revival of that once more, or else we will be the Israelites lost in the desert asking to go back and be ruled by the Pharaoh. And that's exactly what this nation is otherwise on a march to actually towards being ruled by quietly becoming a people of sheep so our government can be a government of
That's
wolves.
a perfect analogy.
All right, perfect. So I've watched a number of Vivek's interviews, and I think for sure this is one of the best. What happened more than anything else in this is Tucker allowed him to speak his mind. And you're seeing more and more that many of these things that he's speaking of, they're truly in his heart. For me personally, I am a first generation immigrant, or my parents immigrated here from Liberia, West Africa, and I am the first person that was born here in my family. And what does that mean exactly? In a time where you are lost, you're confused, the everything that your family has known has moved away, and you now arrive in this particular nation, a nation that's not perfect, a nation that has a terrible history of racism, all these different things that have happened, but yet and still, it provides an opportunity for you as an individual to be able to grow your family, to be able to develop yourself as an individual, and to be able to become part of something bigger than yourself. I think millions of immigrants and millions of Americans have very similar stories of how it is that they left their countries in hope of something better, and they've been able to succeed in a way that they never would have in their own countries. Vivek Ramaswamy is rising to the moment right now, and ideally, what the nation would need would be a leader who is speaking and doing a lot of the same things that he's doing. Again, we're still have to wait to see if he's truly who he says he is, but everything that he does, everything that he says, the passion for which he that protrudes, it shows that this is someone who is dedicated to what is it that they believe. I made a video before about his previous drug accident, but then I read about that he had that vision of Alzheimer's cure from the time he was 12 years old, and he worked in an Alzheimer's ward for elderly patients. So it makes sense for why is it that he started in that particular realm or that particular field. What are your thoughts right now on Vivek? What are your thoughts on the nation? This right now isn't a time. I think for the last 7 years or so, the nation has been fighting and have been just wrestling back and forth between Joe Biden, between Donald Trump, and I think more and more, you're seeing a group of people, especially those who are in the middle, that 80%, who is a bit tired and who are looking for a way, an answer out of this mess that they're in. I'm not saying again that any politician is going to answer our problems individually. Each one of us have to focus and to be able to grow ourselves in a way that is valuable to the market. But in terms of the overall leadership right now, it feels like it's a time that is needed for new person to come in. We saw recently with Mitch McConnell. We've seen with Joe Biden. We've seen with many others that the age of these politicians reaching 80 years old and still holding office is no longer something that is viable. You need a next generation of people who will come and who will carry the torch for what has been done. And more than ever, the nation is currently in need of direction. With $32 trillion in debt, a recession just over the horizon, and the cost of living constantly rising as you have investors and then you have migration, all these different things that are happening. There needs to be sound leadership right now more than ever. What are your thoughts? Please comment below. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining, and have a blessed day.